What's good, everyone? Twisted here with the Open Sorcery, and today I am joined by Devi, as I'm sure you all are well familiar with, Lono, who likely you are familiar with as well, and today we're going ahead and getting joined with our friend and special guest, Whyking. Now, today the subject will be about the Daimon, or the Holy Daemon, the Holy Guardian Angel, the higher self, and anything that happens to be related. And, wherever the hell this conversation happens to lead. So let's go ahead and have Whyking here. Go ahead and start us off. Give people a nice introduction about, your spiritual background, who you are. Like, what do the people out there need to know if they never come across you before?
Hey, I go under the moniker Whyking. I'm from a Nordic country. I have a lineage in spirituality in Norse, so runes and such. But also a Christian background, since all countries in Scandinavia and the Norse countries have Christian background, so I'm familiar with the Bible. Um, and I'm a sort of scholar in these things, an amateur scholar, but I enjoy it very much. And I've rambled on many unique pieces of information just from sheer luck.
Hey, luck, man.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
thing. Hey, you can say it's luck, coincidence, fortune, synchronicity, all these sorts of things. But pretty much you go ahead and by some way or means you find where you need to get to go, and that actually has to do with what we're talking about today, in the sense of like the concept of the daimon, the holy guardian angel, the higher self, whatever you want to phrase or term it as, kind of going ahead and directing you where you need to go for your own personal journey, your growth, your evolution in this lifetime, other lifetimes, for those who believe in reincarnation and the wheel of samsara and all that. But yeah, that's pretty much generally speaking where that like we're what we're going to be talking about and where we're headed in this conversation. But I guess initial thoughts, right? Let's go ahead over to Devi. Like, when you think of the Holy Guardian Angel, what comes to mind essentially?
So there's two different concepts really that I've heard in terms of just like the holy guardian angel, and we hear that mostly in like crossing the abyss, right? That one is the one that you're going to talk to after you cross the abyss.
Yes.
Even though technically you're supposed to find that one before and then have them assist you in crossing, but it everything gets a little backwards.
Yes.
For myself, I honestly believe that it is kind of the tap root of the self. This is the part that's actually connected to the universe. So it's not something that you're reaching for in terms of other, in terms of exterior. It's something that you have to like dig deep into oneself to find. Um, and it's the untainted part, the part that is just pure as the driven snow. Um, it has no moral standing really, because it's how can you put morals on something like that? But I almost think like a tree or a starfish. It is the closest to source, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah. It doesn't operate on human morality. It's gonna be like, hey, look, even if it's not what you want, even if it isn't what humanity ascribes as right and wrong, I'm gonna push you in a fucking direction if you need it.
Exactly.
Yes. And like it's interesting that you go ahead and talk about that already, because like one of the synchronicities you could say, or coincidences, or luck, or whatever, as we were just mentioning, that kind of like preceded this conversation was a video on like done by Jonathan Peugeot, or at least his clips channel on YouTube, where he and the person he was talking to, I don't exactly remember who it is, but they're talking about, does everyone have a daemon or a holy guardian angel, something to that effect. And in the person whom Peugeot was talking to, he was very much saying like, "Oh yeah, like my Daimon goes ahead and he makes my life a bit of hell, but I'm grateful for it because it's helped me grow. It's helped
Explain.
me come out of my shell." Oh, what was that, man?
Maybe we should explain what a daemon is first, and then move on.
Oh, okay. Well,
And I could do that.
oh,
Daemons are
go ahead.
basically learning spirits. They help you learn. They're also related to muses. If you didn't know that, it both muses and daemons come from the ancient Greek society, and Plato and all of those philosophers founded these type of spirits. We're not. I'm not really sure if any of them were related to any of the Goetia. I'm pretty sure some of them are, but we'll never know. But they're completely different from regular demons. Just so we should get that out there. And
Oh,
they're
yes.
a little more interesting than muses, because muses help with they could sing you things, sing you history, but they're going to be singing all damn day long. So
That could be a
Oh,
little
yes.
obnoxious.
Yes.
and
Yeah, and
this is, I guess this would be talking about the non-physical side of guides and spirits, right? Because there's also a physical side to things. Well, especially out here, we have certain animals uh, and certain plants that show up at certain times of guiding. Same thing with like the the clouds and the moon and the way that the stars are positioned. It's technically, from an island standpoint in Hawaii, we are getting, our guides are our island, and they have a personification.
Hmm.
So when we
oh,
talk
yes.
to the island, we're talking to like maybe Maui, or maybe the volcano goddess, or um, on this island it's the ruling elite. You're talking to both the elite and the island, because they come together because of King Kamehameha and all that crap. But yeah, in Hawaii, it can be physical. So just understand that your guides aren't just in your head telling you how to do things; they are in real life.
Oh, yes, yes.
Hmm.
Um, and you
And I
know what?
think
It's
the Greek
Oh, go ahead.
treated the daemons that way as well. Because there's also another one I almost forgot. There's another spirit called the Nike, which helps, which is
Goddess
like a
of Victory,
daemon.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a goddess of victory. It helps during war, only specifically war.
which of course has served for the inspiration for the brand Nike, the shoe brand, the very popular one. For
Yeah.
those who have been living under a rock and don't know of its existence, of course, you know. But yeah, you know what? That's pretty good that you go ahead and you talk about that, Lono, because in terms of the like term daemon, right? Like it's pretty much similar to like the Greek origin of angelos, being a messenger, right? And like both spirits were seen neutrally, and like they didn't ascribe positive or negative that they were capable of doing either. That they were just messengers, spirits from the gods or from divinity itself. And
Like
that,
Hermes,
that was
like
actually
Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, and actually, going ahead and like going on the train of thought of the daemon particularly, right? So, like what you were describing, generally speaking, was like spirits, that you could tap into that could be like a person's particular daemon or holy daemon or holy guardian angel or the higher self or anything like that, but also like any sort of spirits generally speaking that a person could possibly interact with and that sort of understanding. However, though, if we're talking specifically about the holy daemon, that is like the personal guide, the personal higher self, something of that nature. When we look back in the Greek mythos and understanding, actually, it's something that Whyking and I were discussing. He had brought up that Socrates went ahead
Hmm.
and coined the term daemon quite a bit, and that he had one that gave him guidance from beyond, you could say. And Whyking, if you like to go ahead and describe that, like what you shared before and your general understanding of that.
Yeah, it's so my understanding is that I started talking about it because I was reading Socrates again, and I saw you was describing this Daimon that was giving him wisdom and insight and the paths to take in life, and I was like, wait, I got that, and that was quite trippy, and I don't know more than that, but I know from experience that there's this voice, and it's like a specific voice that tells you, hey man, you need to do this, and if you don't listen to me, you're gonna pay, and you have the choice, of course, but once you come to know that voice, uh, then you have a huge benefit to follow it, and you pay the price if you go against it. And of course, you want to do the thing that will benefit you, both spiritually and physically and material things. And it all started when I went, I had a trauma as a kid and started to talk with the wind. And one day the wind you spoke back, and that was that voice. It's quite mysterious.
Yes. And in talking about, like, the wind speaking back, right? Um Now I know that when it comes to just, mythologies out there, right? Like, since we're talking about the Greco-Roman, that there's the sylphs, or there's Zephyr, a wind spirit or wind god, um, as well as, say, like Native Americans. I believe they've spoken about, like, the wind talking to a person, all that sort of thing. So I guess the question comes of, when you were having that experience, was there anything in particular that noted that the wind speaking back was your personal guide, your higher self, as opposed to, say, just, you know, one of these sorts of spirits speaking that was like more so of a general sort of occurrence? Like, what sort of like identified that, sense of belonging?
Well, I like I first started to adhere to the wind essentially speaking back. And then I decided not listen. So I was experimenting with this, and so I stopped listening to the wind, right? And but that voice kept coming in, sort of, and it safeguarded against further trauma that I had later. And it's hard. It's just sort of like there's a well inside of you, and from it, it speaks. And this is then corollary to me, the well of Mimir, in Norse, where uh, where there's the wellspring of the tree of life, and
Yes.
that's the metaphor. And in a sense, there's also in Norse fylkja, which is these guardian spirits, family that follow you and enforce fortunes and well-being. Also, in a negative space, for example, if you get
Hmm.
a dead person, so a specific one, a woman, then it's pretty. You have not long to live, essentially. If you
Th-
have,
th- this is a weird concept.
yeah,
It's not only in Norse mythology, and I gotta tell this story because I don't think you guys know this yet. I
oh,
use a ghost radar app, great app, Ghost Com Radar. There's like a million of them online. One night I went talking with my
Spent having fun with it, yes.
yeah. One night I talked to my dead ancestors, and I found out that all of them are behind me. In this app, it can tell you where the spirits are.
Mhm.
fairly accurate, to within a couple meters. So that's like within 3 feet or so. Um, they were literally all behind me in a V shape, which makes me think that this is when, like, I've heard witches that do seance readings and things like that talk about your wings, not like your angel wings, quote unquote. I mean, like wings of a church or wings of a podium.
Mhm.
They show up behind you and they talk at you.
They're your support
Th-
system from the
They
other
are
side.
your it's the scene in freaking Avatar. Wow. When you look at it, it's exactly the same scene as Avatar. Literally, all of his other incarnations show up behind him when he's in this state. It's a funky concept that that dead relatives could be screaming at you right now.
And later on, I find this Daimon as being this. It's very close to the flow state, if you're familiar with that. It's like the next door. If you were like if there were two doors, one is the flow state, and then the other would be this Daemon, the room where you talk to this uh, whatever it is, really.
Mhm.
It's like, hello, I have a problem, and what should I do? And it has its own character, I suppose. Because I was talking with Twisted, that sometimes you have a scenario, and it says, I don't know, man.
Occasionally, yes.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know, man. And he's like, but I'm a fool. And I was like, me too. I don't know why you come here.
I think those are
Um,
one of those moments, honestly, um, where this concept has come up a lot, where it's like choose your own destiny. The choices before you are going to actually form what your future is going to look like. So it's really up to a flip of a coin at that point. It's like, I don't know, which one do you want? I
Yeah.
can't tell you. And quite frankly, they like to hide shit all the time and play
Because they
dumb, and
because
it's
they know that
annoying.
you know the right answer, and you're just coming to them to ask them if they think that's the right answer as well.
Yeah. Know
This
thyself,
is just
trust thyself.
this is at the beginning of this video, I was like, you know what, maybe if this comes up, I'll talk about this too. In the scene at the end of Samurai Jack, I think this is very interesting because he calls upon Buddha. Like, he goes to talk to Buddha. Like, Buddha shows up in, like, Gautama shows up in the show as himself.
Mm.
And Samurai Jack has lost his sword. That's the only thing that can kill this dark spirit that's taken over the world and whatnot. It's a great show. Um, and so as soon as he gets to Buddha's temple, he sits down and Buddha's like, "Let's have tea." And so, according to Samurai Jack's, because he's a samurai, he's Shinto. He does the tea ceremony, and after he does the tea ceremony, he gives the tea to the Buddha, and he's like, "Can you help me?" And the Buddha's like, "This tea is horrible. I don't think I can help you." And Samurai Jack goes, "What do you mean it's horrible? There's nothing wrong with the tea. There's nothing wrong with me." And then he realizes, oh, there is something wrong with me. There's he didn't Buddha never made the sword. My ancestors made the sword. Only I can bring myself back into balance and get it back.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
regaining one's power.
Like, when he gives him the tea, the Buddha's like, "Oh, this is bad." And he's like, "How can I get my sword?" And he's like, "I don't know. It's your sword." And then Samurai Jack's shadow self starts to talk, and he's like, "What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know how to get the sword? I came here looking like this is the place." And then Samurai Jack is like, "Wait, no. The shadow self is holding me back from seeing the sword at all. I still have it with me. It's just not perceivable. It was always there, and it will always be with me because it is my ancestor, basically." It's funky, like, and then right after that, the Buddha says, "Now the tea is good," and then
Mm.
he leaves the space.
Hmm.
Yes.
It makes sense to
While
me.
you,
Like the Buddha, even though he is an aspect of Gautama, even though he has this like weird religion following him and whatnot, the spirit can be used as a guide, just like anyone else. It's just who you choose to listen to more,
Yeah.
Yep.
and I think that's a better principle, because you don't have to you don't have to listen to the mother in your head that's screaming at you, yelling at you racist shit all day long. You can listen to the Buddha that says, "I don't know, you fucking figure it out. It's your damn
yes,
life."
That
You
yes,
actually
know?
that brings up a point that I wanted to kind of go across. Um, so I see the self as layers, right? We all like to use that layer analogy. We use it all the time. So
layers of.
layers of the onion. We're a bunch of ogres. So the first one, the exterior, is like that societal mask. That is what we build up over our life, and it is mistakenly called the ego. So I know ego in the spiritual community and all of that has grown to be, oh, that's the mask, that is you thinking you have all this power, and just being of the ego is just kind of being full of yourself. um but ego means I. Ego literally translates to I in Latin, me. um so I do believe that is an incorrect association. Underneath that, we have the inner self, and this is my own association. Now, inner self is going to be a mix of what you had growing up, just like you were talking about, Lono, with that mom in your head screaming at you, that inner parent, and that inner microcosm of your own brain and your thought patterns and everything like that. Underneath all of that is your actual self, and we actually suppress most of that for the majority of our lives because it doesn't serve society in a way, and we are trained out of our own selves. We are trained to, oh, artists never make money, you'll never make money as a musician. That's crazy, don't talk about that, kind of thing. It's not proper to speak about that in polite society. We've all heard that, I'm sure. But underneath ego, so that original sense of self, in my opinion, is that higher self, that one that's actually connected to the all. And this is one of the reasons why I call it like the layers of the onion. So at the very, very middle part, the part that actually creates the shoots, if you were to plant the onion, is the part that I do believe that is the higher self. That is the, if I go by Women Who Run with Wolves and Clarissa Pinkola Estes, the one who knows.
Yeah, that's it. I was gonna say this earlier. It's the one that's like, it's where the part of you that's connected to the rest of you is. Like,
Yes.
if you believe in the Akashic record, it's like the part of you that knows everything that has to do with you in the library of the Akashic record, which means it's like you plus like every one of your lives if you've ever lived it, all of the different beings you've ever been, or all of the beings that you've had contact with, as in maybe you were a guide once as a spirit and you helped them and you gave them part of you. All of that shit, like just the Buddhist bowl, that shit, all of the little particles in that bowl of water, Oh shoot, I got my train of thought just ran out the
Oh,
door.
You're fine.
But
it happens.
I agree. I agree.
That's the Hindu aspect. It was a word I was thinking of. It's this. It's the part of you that's connected to the superseding soul of the universe, aka the incarnation after Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Kali, all of them put together into one big ass cosmic baby.
Mm.
Oh yes.
But
Now, you know what? Before you get there, Whyking, I actually recalled something from our like previous conversation. That in Lona bringing that up, I felt like was interesting to go ahead and like state of you were talking about like avatars, right? And a means of like within the Norse Germanic different spiritual system to go ahead and like realize your spiritual self through a means of self deification, not necessarily in a left hand path sort of manner, as we do here, like, in the West, which is like, getting to a point of like time, I believe, from the Hebrew terming or what have you. There's like this one infographic that I happen to reference quite a bit. And yeah, at some point we'll talk about left hand path and right hand path and get into all that sort of thing. But generally speaking, so Whyking, if you could please revisit that particular point about becoming an avatar or self deification as a means to evolve spiritually, and that being like a means of like tapping into the higher self, you could say.
yeah, um, Odin is fundamentally, to understand that, you fundamentally have to understand Odin is a god of many names and many forms and shapes and sizes. And one of the most important poetry is where he hangs himself for 9 days and 9 nights. And after that sacrifice of pain and suffering, he learns the secret of the runes, which is attributed to the Skapanotnir, or the witches of fate. And so he steals the secrets of women. And thus, in that poetry, when you read it, it is from first person. And so you're essentially invoking Odin inside of you by reading it out loud. And thus, and if you look at the Odin as in the whole poetry of the whole mythic structure, Odin has younger face and like a teenager, adult, and then an older god. So there's a blueprint essentially, but it's not like a left hand path, but sort of just association or communion.
Oh yes, yes. Yes, which is why I made that distinction before. That is not necessarily
Yeah,
just particularly like the left hand path or anything like that. In that sort of thing, you're going ahead and denoting how he has like three aspects, the three faces, you could say.
yeah,
Which
yeah.
if we want to go with the theme of three, Lono here was talking about the Trimurti of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and he also mentioned Kali, but Kali is kind of like
You
the
could talk
feminine
about
half of Shiva.
my name. I mean,
No, go ahead.
literally Lono. The reason that I choose Lono is because he is my guide. He's my holy guardian spirit for this island. Like I am currently his avatar,
Yes.
and it only has to do with the it's just the veneration. Like it it's I don't really remember like the what you specifically said earlier, but someone said something about how do you know when you're listening to the wind and the wind is talking back and whatnot. There are certain vehicles that certain spirits on the island use to get around. And Lono here uses the lizard as his vehicle. So by Hawaiian mythology, and if you watched my video on Amakuas, you'll know that uh, each person on the island has an Amakua, an animal that represents their clan. And because Lono is in the same Amakua as me, I am technically an emissary of Lono as well. Because he's an emissary of the Mo'o, which is the lizard clan. And I'm part of the Mo'o clan. So I can use the name, just as he gives me wisdom and shit, and I give him fruit sometimes when I can.
Yes, feeding the lizards apples.
It really comes in handy because I have no green thumb, and he gave me a green thumb, so I thank him for that. And so I use his name as a veneration or like an avatar kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, or in other terms, a patron deity at times.
Yes.
Um, yes, and you know, in that sort of light, you could say, I would truth be told, like I've come across different sorts of like entities that have been like, guardian spirits, you could say, or like my guardian angel, but at this present point, I'm unaware of who my particular, holy guardian angel or holy daemon or higher self is in terms of attributing to a particular entity, so on and so forth. And like I'll use that as a means of like, okay, so if for those listening and you're unsure yourself of how exactly you can go ahead and find that out. Now, obviously, there's no linear path for this. Everybody's journey is going to be different. But one way that, at least in Western ceremonial magic, that is known that a person can do so, it is called the Obermelon ritual or Obermelon operation. And you can go online, and if you're interested in the subject itself, whether it's just the scholarly aspect or potentially performing it, which I will say, many magicians go ahead and state that it is quite a dangerous and risky undertaking to do so. But once again, the information is available if you wish to do that. That is up for your own self-assessment. But in any case, for a summary of what that's all about, it is about attaining conversation or coming into conversation with your holy guardian angel, the higher self. And the ritual, generally speaking, is a long, well, it can be several months, it can be a year, it could be 18 months, usually the time frame that's associated with it, but a long-term magical ritual that one undergoes to reach conversation with said holy guardian angel. And, like it can be the sort of thing that, like, a lot of shadow work is said to be done using that term, or like, facing your demons, or like making sure that you get yourself correct. And it can completely break you. You know what I mean? If you choose to go that route and it's something that does not show itself to you. Um, and I'm actually trying to think currently of the particular film. I knew beforehand I had it on the top of my head, but because we discussed so much in this conversation, I can't remember. So later on, like maybe near the end of this, there's a particular film that came out in 2016 that actually is a fictional representation of the Opera Melon ritual and coming into a conversation with your holy guardian angel. Um, but yes, when you were speaking about Samurai Jack earlier, Lono, I actually went ahead and thought to myself from like a fictional representation, like a cartoonish anime representation, that struck with me of like talking to the higher self, the Holy Daemon, the HGA. That is Full Metal Alchemist, and when Edward goes ahead and is talking to Truth, right? The character of Truth, which, when it comes to like being online on Discord, my online personality, that happens to be like, my profile picture, the thing that I associate with quite a bit, and truth be told, it's like a blank face, like, completely like, color white individual, and the only distinctive thing on the face itself is like a big like shit eating grin of a smile. Yeah. Yeah, and like the whole basis of the character itself is like the reason why it's blank, and when you're interacting with it, it exists within a completely like, blank white like, domain, is that it can go ahead and reflect, what you need to see or experience back at you in the series. Particularly illustrated not in the first series all too much, but in Brotherhood itself, which is more so of the series that is in lockstep in line with the original manga source material. And that is just what particularly rings to me in terms of like, what, that is completely the one thing that like I will carry with me is like one of the most significant sort of representations, not only of the HG and higher self, but like one of those shows and sequences that served as like the foundation of my own spirituality, as I'm sure you guys have heard me attest before, and I'm not sure whether I've addressed it on the channel yet or not, but if not, here we are. So yeah, in terms of, you can say, like, I guess symbolic or fictional representations of the higher self, the HGA, the Holy Daemon. First, let's go with you, Whyking. Do you have anything that kind of like goes ahead and reminds you of that as
Yeah.
something like, maybe could make it easier for someone to comprehend the concept?
Well, it's similar to yours because I had a meditation. So instead of uh, asking, in the mind, the in the headspace of like just voices, right? Uh, did a meditation and visited him. It like so going inner space into myself, and like the inner world in Ichigo, Bleach, yeah. So that anime Bleach, there's an inner world, right? And meeting up with, so in this series, so there Ichigo meets with an old man inside of himself and talks to him, and it's very similar to what you're saying in Full Metal Alchemist, but in my case, it's more like that I go into this inner world, and meditation wise, it started that I collected all energies and it went through the spine and on top of my head, and I became this light body and traveled there essentially, and met, which appears to be this Holy Daemon or higher self, and yeah.
Oh yes. How about you, Debbie? What comes to mind if you can think of a symbolic or fictional representation of the daemon, the HGA, the higher self, and all that?
Well, for myself, I always call it like the inner grandma. Um, and a lot of my clients would actually attest to this because I tell them, because most of my clients are female, and I'm just like, listen to your inner grandma, like she knows. Um, because that's how I always see her. Um, Literally just this wizened old woman. Like she has this plaid shawl around her shoulders, and she's just like, yeah, this is the way that it is, and this is how we're going to deal with it. Most of the time for myself, I don't hear, as I stated in the Claire's video. um, Most of what happens for me is pictures, but I am an open channel in terms of communication with my inner self and my inner grandma. So if there is something that she needs me to know, it's going to pop up for me in a more visceral, like, I'm going to feel it, I'm going to see pictures, I'm going to like get this notion out of nowhere, and I'm just like, ah, thanks granny, got you. um but that's how it works for me. But it depends on the sensitivity of the individual at that present moment.
Oh yes, and something else that happened to come to mind in terms of like not necessarily fictional representations of the holy guardian angel or the holy daemon higher self, but that for those who are aware of Gnosticism, for those who are aware of, that sort of manner of thinking and seeing that, like, there is this thing called the demiurge, or you could say the god that is the false god, that reigns over the material world, right? At least from, you could say, the most popular or like, basic bitch version of Gnosticism that people come across. Um, there's that association a lot of times that is given that when you're speaking with the HGA, when you're speaking with the higher self, that is in fact demiurge. And when you go ahead and your spiritual awareness and such pushes beyond that point, then you get more so to, the actual true, light or, source as it's called, or like the one like the pleroma in that Gnostic terminology and all that sort of thing. Um, in terms of what else came to mind, as we've been having this discussion, for those who are aware of the work of Terence McKenna, who very much so is into he was because he's not around anymore. Rest in peace and all that. But he talked quite a bit about psychedelics and using them as a tool, as a means of having spiritual experiences, whether it be DMT or other entheogens, um, LSD and so on and so forth, mushrooms. And one concept he talked about quite a bit was this of like time and increasing, like as things went along, particularly within this like new century that we are in the midst of. And back when he was saying this was before the 2000s, and like him talking about the singularity and things speeding up, so on and so forth, to a point of coming to a singularity, and like eventually, like that there will be a self at the end of time, to paraphrase what he was saying. And in that sort of sense, he was, by my understanding, talking about the Holy Daemon, the higher self, the HGA, and all that sort of thing in his own wording. And, like, um, that actually goes ahead and kind of like, this is something I have to ask you, Whyking, because I know that, as you stated in the beginning here, that you're of, shamanic origin and such. Um, to what extent are you aware of, or have you participated in taking in psychedelics, mushrooms, whatever sort of entheogens to potentially tap into these sorts of things in of itself, if you have, or at least you have the knowledge of it within, your own tradition?
Yeah. Um, so the drink of the gods is mead with psilocybin. So yes, I have partaken in that, and the meditation that allowed me to go into that inner space is because of that. So I've done it 3 times, and then in the time where I learned the meditation, it was over 5 grams at least, but it's copious amounts, and which expanded what it felt as like several eternities. That makes sense. Um, and in that headspace, I met 3 entities that taught me how to do this meditation, and then I tried this meditation a week after, and it worked first try. So it's quite mysterious, I have to say.
More
Oh
Providence than
yes,
mysterious, but you know.
Yeah.
yes,
So
and
sorry.
um,
But yeah,
no,
there's
you good.
been part of the tradition, of course, mushroom. drinking and mushrooms, combining together in the Norse kind of way.
Yes.
Also, the other mushroom with the Anita Mascaria, which is the berserk mushroom. But I don't touch that.
No? Okay,
Yeah.
so why don't you touch it then?
I have never been taught around it, or the use has been lost. So, but
Santa
there's a
Claus.
clear, yeah, the tradition has been lost around those. So experimentation with that one is, I don't know, man, a bit dangerous because it's quite poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
know
the
the
reason.
secret.
You know the secret?
Yeah, you're not gonna like it.
It doesn't involve piss.
Um, uh, Santa Claus coming to town.
Oh no. Not the
All
reindeers.
I
Oh
can
no.
say, is like Santa Claus comes with the reindeer, and
Oh.
Okay.
No.
his presents are yellow.
Yeah.
Never
So
eat yellow snow.
You
Oh.
want that? You're gonna want that one. You're gonna want to feed some Amanita muscaria to some reindeer, and then drink its piss.
well,
Oh
by
God.
This might get shut down on YouTube. Who knows? But
No, no, it won't. No,
that's the
it
truth,
won't.
though. It's the truth.
yeah,
It's something that's discussed plenty in videos on YouTube. Yeah, so you're all good. You're all good, man.
yeah.
But
But
go
what I've
on.
heard that a gode or a shaman basically eats the mushroom, processes it, and then everyone that partake drinks the piss. So that's why I asked.
Oh. I mean, I guess
From what
less
I heard.
animal cruelty that way, but still, like, God.
Yeah. Um. So I haven't done that, but the regular psilocybin, yeah, it grows just naturally. Nobody gets hurt. I think that's the best way.
Here, here.
Oh
But
yes.
yeah, I have 3 experiences with it, and I haven't done it since I had that breakthrough, and didn't have the need to. Um,
Oh yes. One and done.
yeah.
Now, in us continuing to have this conversation, I had mentioned earlier about the opera melon ritual and all that sort of thing. And while we've been talking, I came across and found what it was I was looking for. So the particular film that I was discussing and talking about, that is a fictional representation of this right, and the right in of itself, it could be it's debated on like whether it's required to be like 6 months or 18 months or anything like that. But if you want to find a fictional representation, and by the attestment of a couple individuals that we know who actually have partaken this ritual before and accomplished it by their own testimony, and that the film itself is actually accurate in portraying this, it is called A Dark Song. It was released in 2016, and yeah, I saw it for myself. I thought, aside from whether it was an accurate depiction or not, because I've not partaken in the ritual myself, that it was just a pretty damn good movie. And also in terms of like the Albert Mound ritual, so if you're looking for reading material in of itself, to go ahead and look into that, then you're going to look for the Book of Abramelin, the Book of Abramelin. You can find a copy on Amazon, and I may or may not go ahead and include a link in the description. But there is a more so modern version. There's the original um, by Samuel McGregor Mathers, but that one is considered a bit wonky from my understanding. But there is a more so modern and revised version with a foreword by Lon Milo Duquette, who is quite a acclaimed author in his own right. So I just wanted to go ahead and present those as well. For didn't want to leave anyone hanging in that sort of sense. And in regards to us talking about the Holy Daemon, the higher self, the Holy Guardian Angel, all of that, we've been talking for quite a bit, and I think it's about time we go ahead and start wrapping things up. So with that, any additional thoughts, anyone? Any sort of things you want to tack on to the end of this? Any closing, finishing thoughts? Let's start with you, Lono.
Nothing much.
So pretty much you covered everything that you had on your mind regarding the subject.
Go watch my video on Alamo Coolers if you want some more. That's all.
Yes, damn straight.
Like and subscribe.
Debbie. Yeah, all that sort of good jazz. How about you, Debbie?
Okay. So, I mean, intuition and honestly, the inner grandma kind of go hand in hand for me. So it's more so train to understand and hear that better, and you will know, and you will get a better relationship with that aspect of yourself. Um, but other than that, no.
And you know what? That's pretty good that you go ahead and use that term intuition, because that's something I wanted to go ahead and like close this out on. Is like, something else I thought about while we've been having this discussion, that the Daemon, the Holy Daemon, the Holy Guardian Angel, the higher self, all that sort of thing. It's pretty much just your intuition with a personality, plain and simple. If you want to put it like that.
Yeah.
It's so true.
And yes, and yeah, Whyking, like, go ahead. Last but definitely not least, you know, you have any additional thoughts to tack
Sure.
on, I should say, at the end of this?
I got initiated with this because of lots of trauma. And then I learned essentially the flow state. And it's important because it ties into peeling the layers we spoke previously. And then the next door is essentially this voice that gives you advice for you. And often the worst kind of advice is advice. But if the higher self is, telling you straight up, hey, do this, and then it's a good thing. I believe it's so. And somehow you just feel luckier, and things go your way, way more when you listen. It's quite
Yes,
nice. Quite nice.
yes, it is a
But
good thing, even if the
sometimes,
actions aren't. Yeah, go ahead. My apologies.
sometimes you want to rebel and see what happens then. Let the other demons, actual, evil things, or run amok. But yeah, free will
Oh
and
yeah.
all that.
Oh yes, yes. Uh, to put it very simply, the Daimon, the Holy Guardian Angel, does not necessarily operate on human morality or that we have within, human civilization or society. It operates on a higher authority, you could say, and all that sort of thing. And to put it simply, you can say that it may not necessarily always be what you want to happen, but is what you need to happen for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. So yeah, with all that said, I think we pretty much wrapped up a nice little bow. So for all of us here, Devi, Lono, and Whyking, like, thank you for going ahead and joining us, by the way, Whyking.
You're welcome. Thanks for having
Yes,
me.
sir.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes. And yes, this is Twisted with the Open Sorcery, and stay frosty, Neguses. Peace.
Like and subscribe.
See you next time, guys.